The Second World War was a total war, meaning that it involved not only the armed forces but also entire societies and economics. The war required the full mobilization of resource industries and manpower for participating nations. Civilians played an essential role in supporting the war through rationing, war production, and various forms of civilian defense. World War II can be a conflict that involved both ideas and interests. While it was primarily driven by a clash of ideologies, it also had significant economic, territorial, and strategic interests at stake. Conflict of ideas. The war was, to a large extent, a clash of contrasting ideologies. The Axis powers, led by Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Imperial Japan, sought to spread and enforce their authoritarian, militaristic, and expansionist ideologies. They aimed to establish hegemonic and impose their belief in racial superiority and territorial dominance, human rights, and freedom. Conflict of interest. The Axis powers sought to acquire resources, expand their territories, and establish spheres of influence. Germany sought leverage in Eastern Europe. Italy aimed to control the Mediterranean for strategic dominance, and Japan aimed to secure resources and establish dominance in the Asia-Pacific region. The Allied powers, on the other hand, were motivated to protect their existing interests, safeguard their colonies, and maintain their economic and strategic influence. Influence on the economy. Industrialization and economic expansion. World War II led to a massive increase in industrialization, production, and economic activity. Nations involved in the war had to mobilize their economies for military production, resulting in the expansion of industries such as armaments, aircraft, ships, and munitions. This boosted employment, output, and economic growth. Expansion of government debt. Financing the war required massive government expenditures, which led to a substantial increase in public debt. Governments borrowed extensively to fund military operations, leading to the issuance of war bonds and increased taxation to finance the debt burden. Economic dislocation and destruction. The war caused widespread the economic dislocation and destruction, especially in the countries directly affected by the conflict. Infrastructure, industries, and cities were devastated, leading to a significant loss of productive capacity. The post-war period required a substantial reconstruction effort to revive economies.
Political influence in the Second World War. Hello, my name is Alejandra Quiñónez, and in this video I will address the political influence of the Second World War. During the Second World War, two sides faced each other. First, there were allied sides made of France, Poland, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, China, and the United States. And on the other side were the Axis powers made of Germany, Japan, and Italy. All the chaos began to the disaffection with the Treaty of Versailles and the rise of Hitler and Nazis to power because the alliance that exists with other totalitarian powers that had been expanded in Italy or in Japan, which is why this will be the causes most important reason why the Second World War break up. And the Second World War is a type of total war because the interest they had in conquering and occupying other territories was evident. Such was case of their Narcissism, in which they sought the surrender of government, and Narcissism was imposed through the military when Germany attacked thousands of British civilians and when they used their nuclear bombs. Also included in this war are hegemonic interests to maintain world order, that the rules of the international system were imposed by these states. For this reason, everything began with Hitler's invasion of Poland because two very obvious interests were on the table. First, territorial expansion so that empires could be extended and found through military conquest and the overthrow of the international order that was in the First World War. And the second interest was the total destruction of Soviet communists. In addition, within the policies of the Nazis was the persecution and murder of Jews as a consequence of the Nazi German regime, because when Hitler came to power in Germany, they began to use the government to attack and exclude Jews from society, and began implementing discriminatory laws and violence against Jews. Finally, it is important to note that when the Second World War ended, there was no complete peace. That is how war is considered a conflict of interest, because there were territorial disputes, the control of government to control the territories, even economic were seen the states. Also, they made use of a chemical and biological weapons. Proliferation was an entity that was evident and with mislook of mass destruction, and ended that after there was international politics was new, and the political order was designed by the Allies through the different international conferences, and within the most important political consequences of the Second World War was the dismantle of totalitarians and the persecution and construction of new regimes in the countries of Germany, Italy, and Japan, as well a disappearance of great dynasty and the overthrow of empires like Turkey that was protected by English and French. And for this reason, after the Second World War, capitalism was reached by many communists, was considered by some countries as a new liberating political alternative. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Bryan. Come with me and we'll be talking about the influence of the Second World War on the social ambit of international scene. The Second World War, as one of the greatest conflicts in human history, it caused a lot of aftermath in the social ambit. On this massive clash of superpowers in the 40s, the populations of these countries were the main victims. As the war was happening in European, African, and Asian territories, civilians, specifically women on their role as the head of family, were victims of despicable crimes such as rapes and tortures, perpetrated by soldiers from the various countries involved in the global conflict. Unfortunately, we have to keep up with this topic of regrettable crimes, such as the genocide and massacres of various ethnic minorities like Jewish and Gypsies. Besides, forced migration was a common practice by the population trying to escape from the anarchy and slaughter in the combat fronts. The most significant fact of this social influence is the number of total casualties. When the Second World War ended, the total quantity of casualties were over 40 or 50 millions. Around 18 millions of them were soldiers and civilians from the Soviet Union, the most affected country about the decrease of its population after the war. As a result of the furious and massive battles happened on the East Front against Germans and their allies, the higher quantity of adult casualties provoked a higher quantity of orphans and disintegration by a lot of families as well. Other examples of the social influence of the Second World War were the increase of poverty levels around the world. Putting the spotlight on Europe, this fact was very significant. because the poverty levels on European territory were much lower compared to Africa and Asia poverty levels. Besides, at the same time, and in a positive way of influence, this conflict was the start of the progress for women on their insertion in the world of work. Even at the end of the war, they were hired of their job and replaced by the men that could return safe from the battlefields around the world. However, uh, this situation allowed that in the following decades, women could finally start fighting to claim their rights to have access to a variety of works, and not just those traditionally accepted for them in the conservative societies, as the conservative wing was the only accepted line of thinking in the most countries by that moment, raising a brand new uh, wave of social movements with their own line of thinking, objectives, and goals like feminism, liberalism, and communism. All of these facts are important proofs of the magnitude influences of the Second World War on the social ambit because the human beings, with their different ideas, values, and ways to see the world, and even how it works, were the main actors, and this diversity and the following contradictions between it produced a conflict which was the point of no return that changed the status quo prevailing until the beginning of the Second World War, and starting a new dynamic in the whole world that is still present and relevant in modern days. And without it, we can picture the world as it is actually. Thank you all. Your attention was appreciated. That's all for my part. And now we will continue with the rest of the topics. Farewell.
The cultural impact of the World War II. Culture refers to the patterns of human activity and the symbolic structure that gives such activities significance and, and importance. Culture has been called the way of life for an entire society. Culture is always changing, and there is so many ways it can be influenced because it is externally affected via contact between societies, which may also produce social shift and changes in cultural practices. Situations such as wars or conflicts may impact in the cultural development or social dynamics. Additionally, cultural ideas may transfer from one society to another through diffusion or acculturation. Now, we have international conflicts, and we know that they can lead to a lot of changes in different aspects. The lives and form of living of people can change as the state relations turn and evolve. Wars have great influence in society and culture, and such a large war as the World War II led to a lot of destruction and pain, and also had a great impact in culture as we knew it. The cultural impacts of the World War II were far-reaching and long-lasting, and it had a profound effect in societal attitudes and cultural norms. The atrocities committed during the war led to a greater focus on human rights and social justice, and there was a renewed focus on the importance of peace and reconciliation. Some of the main cultural changes that we can mention are the existentialism and postmodern movements like feminism. First of all, we're gonna talk about existentialism, and this emerged as a philosophical movement in the aftermath of the World War II, and is largely as a response to the horrors of the war as the sense of the existential crisis it created. Existentialism had a significant impact on culture and society in the post-war era, and it has an emphasis on individual freedom and responsibility that resonated with many people who were struggling to rebuild their lives after the war. Existentialist themes can be seen in literature, art, and film from the period, and artists and writers sought to grapple with the sense of alienation and despair that characterized the post-war world.
The existentialists argue that our purpose and meaning in life cannot come from external sources such as God, government, or teachers, but instead it is entirely determined by ourselves. And they argue that while life was absurd, irrational, and uncontrollable, it was up to us to find our own individual path towards a higher purpose. And there's a really interesting quote by Simone de Beauvoir that she wrote: "It is possible for humans to snatch the world from the darkness of absurdity." We also have movements that have been around for years, but because of the world, the views change and evolve, and this is the case of the feminist movement. The World War II led to a significant change in the gender roles as women took on traditionally male roles in the workforce and society. This shift in gender roles will have a lasting impact in the feminist movement, leading to a greater equality for women in the years following the war. Women play an increasingly important role in the war effort and began to challenge traditional gender roles and expectations. The post-war era saw the emergence of a new wave of feminism, and this is often referred to as a second wave of feminism, which focused on issues such as sexual liberation, reproductive rights, and workplace discrimination. One of the key events that helped to catalyze the feminist movement in this era was the publication of the Betty Friedan's book called The Feminine Mystique in 1963. This book challenged the notion that women's primary role was to be only a mother and a wife, and it argued that women had been systematically denied access to greater opportunities and experience that will allow them to fulfill their full potential. The feminist movement of the post-war era had a significant impact on culture and society, and women began to demand greater representation in the workplace, as well as greater control over their own bodies and their reproductive choices. The movement also led to the creation of a lot of women's studies programs in universities, as well as the development of feminist theories and criticism in fields such as literature, film, and art. And it also helped to pave the way for greater gender equality in the workplace and in politics, and it helped to challenge traditional gender roles and expectations that the society had on women. Today, feminism continues to be a significant force for social and cultural change around the world.
The Second World War had a significant impact on global politics and brought about several important changes in the world order. Here are some of the key changes that the Second World War brought to global politics. Bipolarity. The war marked the emergence of two rival superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These two nations rose as political and military leaders and became the main players on the world stage during the Cold War that followed World War II. Decolonization. The war weakened major European colonial powers, leading to decolonization in many parts of the world. Colonies sought their independence, resulting in the formation of new nation-states in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Formation of the United Nations. World War II led to the creation of the United Nations in 1945. The United Nations was established with the goal of maintaining international peace and security and became an important forum for diplomacy and conflict resolution. Human rights and international law. The war and the horrors of the Holocaust highlighted the importance of human rights and the need to protect individuals from atrocities. This led to the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 and the development of international humanitarian law. European integration. After the war, Europe sought to avoid future conflicts through economic and political integration. This led to the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951. The precursor to the current European Union. That organization became a significant political and economic entity that promoted cooperation and peace in Europe. Cold War. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union after the war led to the Cold War, a period of political and military tension between the two blocs. This had a significant impact on global politics, dividing the world into two ideological blocs and triggering regional conflicts in different parts of the world. Arms race. The war resulted in an intensification of the arms race, especially between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both superpowers competed to develop nuclear weapons, which had significant implications for global security and international stability. Shift in global power. World War II led to a significant shift in global power dynamics. While Europe had been the dominant center of power before the war, the conflict weakened European nations and transferred much of the global influence to the United States and the Soviet Union. These two superpowers emerged as the primary players in global affairs, exerting their influence on a global scale. Formation of military alliances. In response to the emerging Cold War and the threat of Soviet expansion, the United States formed military alliances with several Western European nations, leading to establishment of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization in 1949. That organization became a crucial alliance in maintaining security and countering the Soviet Union's influence during the Cold War. Rise of the United States as a global superpower. World War II propelled the United States into a position of unparalleled global influence. The war boosted the United States economy, leading to increased industrialization and technological advancement. The United States emerged from the war as the world's leading economic and military power. These are the prominent changes that the Second World War brought about in global politics.